Hello everyone, my name is Luciano Gule. I'm a PhD candidate in political economics at Osaka School of International Public Policy in Osaka University in Japan. So today I'll be presenting my paper entitled Foreign Direct Investment, Growth and Environment in Southern Africa Development Community SADC. Just to contextualize, when I'm talking about SADC, I'm talking the countries which are pointed in a slide by blue. There are 16 countries. It's a regional bloc in Southern Africa. So, as we know, SADC as a group is compound with one of the fastest growing emerging economy in the world. And for example, in 2017, when I did this research, Democratic Republic of Congo has economic growth of 8.6, and followed by Tanzania and Mozambique with 7.2 and 6.5 respectively. As a group, all the average economic growth is 5%. And this economic growth is true that the FDI plays a vital role, and those investments are going there. They bring a lot of technology transfer, skills transfer, and also unemployment. But there's a lot of concern recently regarding it. One of the concerns is about the environment, an increase in energy consumption. And many of the times, these projects, they want to produce in a way that's efficient and as cheap as possible. And this way is not the best way sometimes in terms of environment. And those countries, they don't have enough resource and technology to combat pollution, but at the same time, they want to grow economically. That's why the main objective of this study is to investigate the impact of foreign direct investment, economic growth, and capital stock on CO2 emission in SADC. Yeah, and our first report that the inflow of FDI GDP it has impacted the CO2 positive during 1990 to 2014. Yeah. So when we go to literature review, we find mixed results regarding the benefits and costs of foreign direct investment. And for example, we have study of Peng et al., which shows the positive impact of foreign direct investment on economic growth in the host country. But also, we found the study about Shafiq. Shafiq points out that the higher level of CO2 emission it tends to lead to the reduction of the productivity capacity of a country and also to the climate change. In the next slide, I'll bring a table where I bring stats regarding results regarding empirical studies. So when we talk about capital stock, a theoretical study made by Rush 1997, it points out that the capital stock has ambiguous effect on optimal level of deposition of toxic waste. So in this table, as you can see here, we 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 talk about foreign direct investment effect on economic growth, foreign direct investment effect on environment, and GDP effect on environment. Yeah. So we use a lot of estimation here, but we see positive and negative if consequence. So some studies they point out significant positive and other studies they point out significant negative. So in the end we can say that it's mixed results when we talk about the impact of foreign direct investment on economic growth and environment. So we come to our study. In this study, I'll be using static and dynamic panel data. And in static panel data, I'll estimate it using two-stage least square fixed effect, ordinal least square fixed effect, and pooled OLS. On dynamic panel data, I'll be using different and system general method of the moment. And as I said before, we are talking about 16 counts of SADC. And this 16 count of SADC, the data are correct from 1990 to 2014. All the data I got from World Bank Development Indicators. So first, we use Cobb-Douglas production function. As we know, in the Cobb-Douglas production function, with Y, which denotes our GDP, and Y is influenced by A, which is total factor productivity, K is a capital stock, A is energy consumption, and L denotes labor. And also we can see here in the corp dollar production fraction that K and L, the additional factor of production, and income, which is output, depends on energy consumption, and energy consumption is directly related to CO2 emission. And in this model we can find that the FDI and energy consumption are inputs required to get our total output, which is GDP. Some derivation we get here to our main equation. Our main equation here is CO2 emission, which can be influenced by foreign direct investment, economic growth, and capital stock. We divide our equation by L to get per capita coefficient. And first of all, we are using CO2 emission as a dependent variable because CO2 emission is frequently used in the literature as a major contributor in the global warming, and it's the primary variable of concern in international agreement. And also we have here our instrumental variable. Our instrumental variable will talk about financial development, population growth, and trade openness. And going to the results of the first result is our static panel estimation. As I said before, we use two-stage least square, OLS, and pooled LS. But I'll go directly to pooled OLS. In pooled LS, we can see here that the GDP and FDI, they have positive and significant impact. FDI at 10% and GDP at 1%. What does it imply? It implies that an increase of 10% of foreign direct investment, it increased the CO2 emission by 0.8%, as we can see in the data. And also an increase by 1% of GDP, it increased the CO2 emission by 1.2%. And when we come to capital stock, we can see that it's negative and significant. It implies that an increase of 10% of capital stock, it decreases the CO2 emission by 0.1%. So here we can see maybe there's a pollution heaven. So going to the result of dynamic panel estimation, we are using different end system, but because we did a test, Hansen test of identifying the restriction, so we find that different JMM is not suitable because it rejects the null hypothesis. That's why we're going to system JMM. In the system JMM, as we can see, the three variables, all of them, they're significant, where we have GDP and foreign direct investment, which are positive, and GDP at 10% and foreign direct investment at 5%, and capital stock is significant and negative at 5%. What does it imply? As I said before, it implies that foreign direct investment and GDP, both of them, they impact the CO2 emission in a positive way. It means that they count in SADC count when they are lowering the environmental standards. They are lowering environmental standard in order to attract more FDI. And when they're doing so, what happens? Like those projects, they tend to pollute more. But when it comes to capital stock, as we saw before in static and now in the dynamic panel estimation, we see a negative sign. So this negative sign, it shows us that when they count the investing in non-polluting environmental technology, it tends to be very good for environment. So as we saw in our result, the CO2 emission in SADC count is very sensitive to the level of GDP, capital stock, and FDI. And economic growth and foreign direct investment, they are positive and statistically significant, and they are the main source of CO2 emission in the block of SADC. And contrary to those two variables, a capital stock has a negative insignificant impact on CO2 emission. What does it mean? It means when the country invests in more in capital in non-polluting advanced technology, the CO2 emission tend to reduce. So in the long run, this persistent decline in environmental quality, it may exert a negative externality into the economy to affect human health. As we know, CO2 emissions have a bad effects on human health. And CO2 emissions, sure, it can be reduced, but not too much at cost of economic growth in SADC. Why? Because this they didn't reach the cabinet car which they pointed, but it doesn't mean this discount they should keep on polluting. No, discount they need to use efficient technology, or I mean the use of efficient technology should be encouraged to enhance domestic production. It means when the FDR project goes to SADC, they need to be obliged to bring the efficient technology. And also those FDI projects, they should import environment friendly technology from their host country. Yeah. And another issue should be done SADC. Those count, they should increase the environmental standard and improve the efficiency